up and online. So, hello. I'm excited to jump in here. I've been really focused on jumping in and sharing my message with you. I know I've kept some of this stuff to myself, but I think right now we're in a phase of our growth where it really needs to be shared. It really needs to be seen. And even if it takes some practice on my part, I'm dedicated to showing up here for you and help sharing how I'm seeing things, how I'm choosing to move things, even when fear may be present. I know we've been taught a lot about how we should respond to fear, try to avoid it, try to control it so we don't have to look at it or work around it. Um, but there's another way to view fear and how to approach it that is actually a much more powerful, much more transformative way, not only to create in your life, but to give yourself that sense of safety, to know that there really isn't many things you need to truly be afraid of, that fear is really just an illusion that is helping you grow, helping you learn, helping you find a new path. So I just wanted to jump in here and just presence and have you guys think about what choices are you making? Getting crystal clear, are the choices you're making from, are they from fear? And there's scales to that. Some of it might be very obvious, going, yes, I'm afraid of losing my job. I'm afraid of not being financially stable. I'm afraid of what my health is going to look like. So I need to do this so I can be healthy. Thinking that, you have to modify what you initially set out to do because of that. So sometimes fear is very easy to find in responses. Sometimes it's very subtle. It's actually packaged in a bundle of what we would consider a responsible shift to the plan. And I want to kind of show you how you can find those subtle little fear packages that are still changing how you approach things and how you're creating in your life. Because ultimately, if you're choosing to create or mold your life from a space of fear, what's going to happen is you're going to be actually presenced with more of what you are afraid of. You're going to also end up creating things that you don't really want. It's going to show up as unintended consequences, things that you had no choice. This is just how things are going to go. This is how things were designed. And it's not what I want. And there can be a lot of frustration and anger and resentment around that. And I want you to know that's not how things have to go. So I wanted to jump in here this morning and just share a very personal example of some choices I'm making in my life in light of what's been going on with the current pandemic and how I'm responding to that and choosing to stay in a place of power instead of changing my choices based off of fear of what could happen or fear of what people are telling me will happen. And yes, I understand it. It's not always easy, especially when you are faced with, especially your health. Talk about really having to look at how you feel safe in your life and choosing, are you going to take ownership and power over it? Or are you going to leave that to someone else's hands? So I'm just going to, in case you don't know who I am, this is the first time you're tuning in. I'm about 7 months pregnant. I'm due in June. And, this baby was a bit of a surprise. My first son is 17 years. But I decided from the beginning that I wanted this birth experience to be different than the first. I felt that, in the medical establishment, a lot of my power of choices, a lot of my belief in myself was really sideswept based off of risk mitigation. My first son ended up being a cesarean because he was breech. And I had really no choice in how I got to deliver him. And just watching how that process unfolded, everyone, the father, myself, my son, being isolated from each other for a period of time as we were, working through the medical procedure for going through the cesarean. And I decided that's not how I wanted it to be this time. So fortunately, like my first choice was I decided to have birth in a birth center versus a hospital, which, hindsight, I'm so thankful that I did, because I'm seeing now even more choice is being taken away for how that experience is in hospitals. I've been hearing stories, especially in bigger cities, about fathers not being allowed in the delivery room, which I think is extremely detrimental, not only to the mother, but to the baby as well, for a lot of emotional and physiological reasons. I know they're looking at it as, trying to keep everyone safe. However, I think that risk mitigation, that safety illusion in that situation has gone way too far, where they're creating something more dangerous than what they're trying to protect the mother and the baby and the father from. So I'm so fortunate that, being in that birth center, that right now it doesn't look like that is an option. Now, I'm also fully aware that at some point, if that no longer becomes a choice, I have a choice to make. And how do I want that birth to go? Knowing that, if I have the birth in a way where the baby and I and the father are going to be separated, is that something that I want to do? And I just want to pause here and share a little bit more detail, because I don't exactly, because not everyone's going to be always aware of this, but with your second delivery, if you've had a cesarean prior, there is a lot of more perceived risk in delivering the second time. It's considered more dangerous. If you go to the hospital, they're recommending just another cesarean. They're not even allowing you to try a natural delivery, which is what I'm going for this time through the birth center. So there's already a risk to that. There's already concerns based off of the normal medical establishment, which I decided that I don't need to take. That's not the route I want to go. So knowing that if I'm in a situation where I'm going to either be put into a hospital, or they're going to have different medical interventions, or even if the father is going to be removed from the room, that is not something I want to go through. And yes, that does develop fear. I shared about this a little bit earlier. Even as I was going through, I had to sign all these waivers going, I'm aware of the risks that I'm signing up for. I'm aware of what's going on. And even though they're like very small risks, I'm talking like 0.1% risk, and the 0.1% risk is death. Yes, it was terrifying. Mentally, like, I know it's a small risk. Like, I know it's not likely, but my body wasn't responding that way. My body was responding in terror. I started to get really hot and clammy and sweaty. I had to take my jacket off. But I was willing to still walk into that. I was still willing to go through that, because I know the known path, what that leads to. And I've decided that how I want to make decisions in my life, I want to make my decisions based off of my life, not off of what I see coming from death. Because living from that space, if you're making decisions based off of fear, based off of what you're worrying is going to come down the pipeline, what your death is going to look like, what happens is you're not living. You're in this in-between state where you're protecting yourself, but you're not really alive. You're not living your life. You're not trying new things because of the what ifs, because of the worries. And for me, that just started to raise the question of, what am I living for? Why am I even trying to prolong my life? Like, what is the point? Like, why? And I know, especially in the cases of depression, that's a big question that comes up. It's like, what is this big, grand, wonderful life for? I don't feel alive. I don't understand the point. And then it's coming from making decisions based off of fear and risk mitigation, and going to what we perceive as safe and trying to live our lives that way. So, even when I'm making this choice here, I'm making my choices based off of what's best for my baby's life. So I'm focused on his life, not his death. And that profoundly changes how you make your decisions. And I know it's not easy to necessarily take your focus off that, the other path, a focus off the death, because it's scary. You don't necessarily want that. But if you live your life focusing over here, trying not to get to that death point, you're also not focusing on your life. You're not living this path. You're in purgatory. And I think that's part of the reason why, in the last decade or so, we've been so obsessed with like these zombie vampire movies where it's like you're not really alive, you're not really dead. It's kind of been romanticized and fantasized, but being in that space is very difficult, very demoralizing. It creates anxiety, it creates depression, resentment, anger, frustration, and a lot of things that I've been seeing many people struggling with. So right now we're at that choice. Do we want to continue to focus and avoid death? Because let's be really honest here, no one's going to avoid that path. I mean, I hate, that's a really blatant truth. I can't say when, how, why, or where, but that is the fact of life. You're not going to be here forever. And, if your first thought is going, oh my God, thank God this sucks, that's a number one indicator that you're still focusing here. You're not focused on your life. And yes, if you're focusing on your life, you might go, oh my gosh, I don't want to die because like this is fun. That's great. But don't let this distract you from the path forward, from the path that you want to go down, from the choices that you want to make. So it's really just a shift in your focus. What will make you feel more alive? What will support other people's lives? Because one of the beautiful things I'm seeing about this is everyone is being very concerned and courteous of other people's well-being, which is amazing, which we need to, we're all in this together. We need to love one another. But instead of focusing on how are we going to not let people die, we need to focus on how are we going to help people live. And yes, that's going to look very different than, what it has in the past. But that opens up more possibilities. That opens up more opportunities. That takes the I have to do this, or this is the way things need to be, the force, the control, the pressure away, and allows everyone to really look at things of what is going to help us live. What is going to sustain our society? What's going to help everyone be healthier and connected? And I don't entirely agree that isolation is the only option. Especially just seeing, watching from just take it from the viewpoint of a newborn baby. There's even been studies done in Nazi Germany where, Hitler wanted to kind of start taking compassion out of his soldiers because he saw that as the one downfall to being able to really carry out his plan. So what happened is he started to breed his soldiers in a nursery and isolated them from their mother. And that plan quickly ended because all the children ended up dying. We need that connection. And yes, at the beginning, the reason why it's so dramatic and it's such a result with infants is because the conscious mind really hasn't been fully developed. So there's no reason, there's no mentally for making themselves feel okay with it. It's purely an unconscious response. Now, we still have that same reaction to that method. The only difference is we can reason our way through it. That doesn't mean the impact isn't as dire, isn't as devastating, isn't going to be as long lasting. But there is definitely something to say about mitigating and removing physical contact. Even in India, there's been practices of where women would go in and they would actually massage and touch and be with the sick versus locking them up in a hospital room or isolating them and the ability of just having the patients feel that love and that connection, helping them get healthier and stronger. So again, I don't want people to warp my words and take this out of context. I'm not saying we shouldn't practice good hygiene. We shouldn't be considerate of, what we come in contact with, who other people are. But I believe there's a different way than this complete isolation, which is why I am such a strong stand for how I want to give birth. Because I don't want to bring a child into a world where they feel like they have to be hidden away and secluded and isolated. I want to bring the child into a family, to joy, to love, to peace. And that starts with how I orchestrate how I give birth. And, one of the conversations that we've even been having is maybe what happens is I end up having then a home birth by myself. But again, that comes back to your power of choice. What is important to you? What feels right to you? And understanding that just because it's something that's important and right for you does not necessarily mean there won't be some fear, some anxiety attached to that. That just means that you get to look at that, you get to work through that. So that way you can be at that place where you can still make that choice and stand strong in it. So the question I have for you today, and I'd love to hear, what choices are you making today? Like, what is important to you? What are you willing to take a stand for and create in your life? And how are you going to start creating that, even in light of the current situation? So let me know. I'm also going to drop a link in here if anyone wants to chat and kind of understand how to work a little bit deeper through the fear response, how to distinguish between, again, at the beginning, I was like, well, when do you really know when your plan should change versus if it's fear steering you sideways? And I have a perfect technique. I use yoga to kind of help you dive into your body so you can answer that for yourself, because truthfully, that's something someone else can't tell you. It's a very personal, it's a very center to you choice. But I can share with you a technique that will help you identify that within your own body. So even when fear is present, you can be crystal clear as to your path forward, and you can stop deviating. So you can start living your life and creating everything you truly want. So I'm going to drop a link in here. That way you have it. It's a free call. Just book the call with me. We'll walk through. I'll kind of listen to where you're at, and we'll create a plan, because we don't have to be in this alone. Even though right now it's looking like, we're going to have to follow the isolation path, doesn't mean we have to be alone. So I want to be there for you as much as I possibly can. So when I'm off this live, I'll drop the link in the post comments. So go ahead, click on the link. I'd love to chat, help you create a plan, because we all get to come through this powerfully. We all get to create the life we want. And right now is the time that we get to do it.